All right, I'd like to call the Tuesday, October 11, 2022 discussion meeting to order. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before roll call, I just want to hand off to Mrs. Stepnick for something brief.
Thank you, Mr. Caligieri. I would just ask that we take a moment of silence. On Sunday, our community lost an enormous leader, somebody who loved Plum Borough. He might have been from Penn Hills, but loved Plum Borough and our students, our district, and dedicated decades of his life to us. And I would ask that we take a moment of silence in remembering and honoring Representative Tony DeLuca. Thank you.
All right, roll call, Mrs. Macro.
Mr. Adams.
Here.
Dr. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Caligieri.
Here.
Ms. Chudderwitz.
Here.
Mr. Devine.
Here.
Mr. Hill.
Here.
Mr. Sokolsky.
Here.
Mrs. Stepnick.
Here.
Ms. Wetmore.
Present.
Student Representative Ms. Lauren Briggs.
Here.
The board met in executive session on October 11, 2022 to discuss matters of litigation, safety, personnel, and real estate. Citizens' comments on agenda items. No one is with us today. We'll move on. Personnel, Mr. Devine, anything for today?
Nope, sorry.
Student achievement and activities, Dr. Anderson.
Thanks for that wind-up, Mike. Okay, we have the Future Ready Comprehensive Plan. Dr. Howland.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. As the board well knows, last month you approved the Special Education Comprehensive Plan. We indicated at that time, and honestly, quite frankly, all the way back to the spring when we started to get input from the board with regard to how we would move forward with this comprehensive plan. We solicited your input. We solicited input from a host of stakeholders that Ms. Sedlak, who is one of her responsibilities is the Future Ready Comprehensive Plan. She's going to go into more detail with regard to the constituent group that we had that participated in this. But essentially, what this is simply said, if you fail to plan, you can plan to fail. And if you don't set goals for yourself, and if you don't measure those goals, you're probably not going to achieve them. So you have to know what your goals are. You have to know how you're going to measure those goals. And then you have to figure out whether you're actually making progress towards those goals. The other thing that we think is important is that we're transparent with our community and we let them know exactly what our goals are and how we're doing. And as you know, those members that have been on the board for the years that you have, January is the time that we generally go through and we put ourselves out there. We say, this is how we're doing. We need to, continue along the same route in some areas. In some areas, we need to detour and we need to figure out different ways to do that. And the only way we do that is if we give everybody input to see how we're doing. And so that comprehensive plan, a major part of that comprehensive plan is the balanced scorecard approach that we use. I am particularly proud of that with the way our team has put that together. And I would challenge anyone to go to the other districts in Western Pennsylvania and see if they have something as transparent as we do, as visible as we do, to put it out there for folks to determine whether we're meeting those goals or not. So tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the balanced scorecard. Ms. Sedlak's going to talk about the process that we went through. And the ultimate goal is, it won't be approved at this month's action meeting. We wanted to give you time to look at it, although you've seen it in Ms. Sedlak's capsule. You've had an opportunity to give input into the goals. And now it's time to, land this plane. And the goal would be to have it approved for November and then ship it off to the state. Ms. Sedlick's going to talk about how we have to have it out there for a month for people to review it. And so I'm going to turn it over to her and let her do her thing. And I would also like to thank her for the work that she has put into this, bringing the team together and leading us through this process. So, Ms. Sedlick, turn it over
Thank
to
you, Dr. Highland. As Dr. Highland said, being in charge of the Future Ready Comprehensive Plan, I really did a lot of research prior to moving in this direction. Our plan and our balanced scorecard is bar none better than anyone else. When you look at the 6 goals, the key performance indicators, and then the annual action plans that are a part of each of those key performance indicators, I don't know any other district that does something as in-depth as what Plum Borough School District is doing, and I'm really proud of what we are doing because it sets the bar really high if you look at other school districts. Part of the comprehensive plan is to identify 4 goals, and they limit you to 4 goals. We have 6 strategic goals, but satisfying our customer and community really encapsulates the other goals and measuring against the best. And so I feel very confident that with those 4 goals that you'll see in our comprehensive plan, action plan, that we really are addressing all of the 6 goals. Mrs. Macro, again, you've seen this, our strategic goals are what drives us. And if you could go to the next one, please. We really talked about the importance of our strategic goals with our steering committee. We had parents, community members, board members, students, all of the department leaders and the administrators on the steering committee. And we've started meeting last spring and throughout the summer. And so they were the group that really vetted every component, every one of the state required 5 different reports. Again, this kind of outlines why we do a comprehensive plan, and I think Dr. Highland spoke very eloquently about that. If you don't have a plan in place, you don't know how to measure your goals, and I think we're very transparent with our balanced scorecard. These are the members of the steering committee. There's 2 pages of it, Mrs. Macro. Again, we were very fortunate to have 4 students on the group. Ms. Price is one of the members who matriculated on as a senior because we had 2 seniors on last year. And so Ms. Price has been a part of it. Dr. Highland, we're going to talk a little bit about the balanced scorecard. So Mrs. Macro, if you could open the balanced scorecard, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Walsh, or I'm sorry, Chief Hanna for goal 1.
I will add, as Chief Hanna is walking over, one of the things that we talked about with the steering committee was that when we set these 6 strategic goals, we did it back in 2019, we didn't know at that time that we were going to have 2 years of a pandemic. And so in all candor, those 2 years in the pandemic made it very difficult to, get to the end point with those goals. And so we agreed as a group that we were going to keep those goals, but we were also going to change some of the key performance indicators to kind of reflect some of the things that happened during the pandemic. And I think you'll see that in some of those key performance indicators as we go through this.
So obviously the key performance indicators are here for each of you to look at. I don't want to read through each one, but my team consisted of myself, Cassie Smith, Dr. Iera, and Principal Gauntner. We put together the key performance indicators. We tried to make sure that we were keeping in mind we want to have the students have input through their annual survey. We did something new this year. We're going to be asking questions of the staff when it comes to safety and security and the drills that we're doing to make sure that they understand why we're doing them and that they're buying into them. And so we're trying to address their concerns and make sure that they're sort of on board. They're not just doing what's in the book. They're going to do it because they understand why we're doing it. And the only other thing outside of those 2 is we kind of went off the, kind of reached out a little further this year with a mental health screening tool that we're going to introduce. It's going to be
It's going to take a while to put in place. Dr. Iyer is actually leading us on this. We've got some ones we're looking at. We're still trying to pick one to go with, but it's probably not going to take effect until next school year because it's going to take that long to get one picked out and approved that we can use. But these are our indicators, and we're trying to involve all individuals that we can in the process.
I think 1.4 is probably one of the most pressing things coming out of the pandemic.
Quite frankly, I saw in the New York Times today that I think it's the one of the medical associations is recommending that every teenager be screened for anxiety. Now, I don't know whether that's because of the pandemic, but if we don't ask, we're not going to know. And I think this is going to set us apart, the fact that we're actually asking folks, doing some sort of screening tool. I think the screening tool is going to be very, very important. And the other thing that the board needs to know, that's going to be voluntary. We're not going to force anybody to do it. That's important. There are going to be some people that are not going to want to do that, and we have to respect that. But our goal, and that's why we don't have a baseline. We want to set a baseline, and we want to try and continue to improve upon that. But I think that's something that I think may bode well. And if, from my perspective, and I'm sure yours as well, if we can save one kid, then this is well worth it. So, sorry, Ken.
And Dr. Hyland, if I could ask, who will help sort of set that baseline number, and how would you go about it? And truly, I mean, we all sit here with our stuff out, right? Because if my son calls or whatever, but how much is the anxiety for kids in particular related to this, right?
Yeah.
Or something along this line. So, I mean, I'm sure the pandemic doesn't help any of that, right? Because we all lived home with these, and that was our communication. But I'd be curious as to who helps set that baseline and what we're asking, and to truly get a full widespread, not just focus on, you were home for a year.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. I think the first thing is that we have to develop the survey, and we have to figure out the survey, and we're going to bring that forward to the board to make sure the board's good with that survey. So that's number one. And to answer your question, Ms. Stepnick, it's the kids who are going to set that baseline. It's how many kids take that survey. And our goal is going to be, and we'll obviously communicate that with parents, letting them know that we're going to do that. But then whatever that first year, how many kids are willing to take that, that is our baseline. And then we're going to have to improve. And you can see in there, we're trying to improve that by 5% every single year. Ultimately, we would love to be able to get to 60%. When they do surveys, they say if you get to 70%, it's gold. It's like the golden number. First time out of the gates, we're going to set it at 60. It doesn't mean we're not going to try and get higher. I think it's going to depend on how people react to the survey, whether people are supportive of the survey, and if they see that we're trying to do what we do with that information, and whether we're actually helping kids.
Sure.
And I think I hope that answers your question.
No, I agree with that, and I think it would be a good in that survey. I would ask that we automatically ask kids, do you know that there's additional resources that have been put in place these last 2 school years for you? And I think it's a reminder to parents that, you came here and you said, my kid needs help. We use the resources that were given to us from these different, stimulus or whatever they were called at the time.
If I may.
If we can do it that way. So I would like to just make sure that we revisit that topic so it's
If
all
you look at
covered.
1.5,
That's what I was going to say.
Right,
That's
and I
part-
did, but my concern is just that it's back to the bridging the gap in the community of, for 2 years, and for really a full year, it was my kid needs help, or my children need help. We're trying, so try to help us too, so we know that we're doing it right, or maybe we're doing it wrong. We need to know that.
I just want to say first, thank you so much for making the mental health piece part of our safety and security in this district, because I think that speaks volumes and takes a huge step forward in normalizing mental health and mental health care. And for me, as important as the screening is, 1.2 is huge, because I think that was the question that really opened a lot of eyes on this board during the pandemic, was when we had less than, 25% of our students responded they did not have an adult in their life that they felt comfortable going to. So I think that is going to be very helpful because it'll help us identify, are we doing a better job being open? So I really, really appreciate the work that you guys did in this area. Thank you.
For a survey like this to get parents more comfortable, would it be beneficial to provide them the survey, have them take the survey, and give them the information on why we're doing it, what we're doing it? That way they can see the questions in advance. And what actually might be interesting is have them take the survey on their kid and then compare the two. But that would open up another can of worms that maybe we don't want to go down. But it would be very interesting to see the kids' view and the parents' view on where they think their child is.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really tough the first time out of the gates.
Right, for sure.
Doing this. We're not going to reinvent the wheel either. We're going to go and see how other districts have done it and what successes they've had. Now, remember, you're just, not at tonight's, but in November's, you're hopefully approving these goals. And we get our action team together and figure out how we do this. But I can promise you that we are bringing this survey to you so you folks can see this survey, okay?
And I think we know that surveys can be a sensitive subject, and so I think what Mr. Hill is saying is you know what I mean, to be able to make a PSA with it so parents understand and know what its purpose is and how it will be used will be important as well.
I think that's the main reason it's voluntary.
Yep.
Like, parents are gonna know this is a voluntary survey.
Yep.
Right.
So we're probably gonna have to put out some fires thinking that people were forcing kids to do this when we're not. They'll just make it up on their own and say that we are. But we're not. We're gonna just have them take it and hopefully they understand that we're just trying to provide services for their kids. That's it. That's that simple.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Sorry, Officer Hannah, you got to stand there a long time.
Goal 2 is increased levels of student achievement and academic rigor. I served as the lead with Goal 2. I worked with Dr. Hibner, Dr. Zarmak, and Ms. Fight on Goal 2. There are 6 key performance indicators. The first 2 are how we measure how our students are doing, is achievement and growth. Just a side note, Ms. Sedlak and I sat in on a meeting today. The state and federal government are still trying to figure out with the pandemic of what that actually means. So they're going to omit certain years in the data, and on the growth, they're going to add more years onto the end. So our charts are subject to change based on the information that we receive. We just sat in that webinar, I think, at 11:30 this morning. So there are 2 goals in regards to asking our students, are they challenged? Are they engaged? So we're asking our kiddos in regards to classroom instruction and what their experiences are. And what is new this year is looking at our high school and our AP. One is the number of students that are taking AP and developing action plans in regards to what are the barriers to our students taking AP. And as they are taking the courses, how many of our students are scoring a 3 or above, which means that it would be accepted as a college credit at a college or university of their choosing. I will tell you that there will be a lot of work in regards to building out the action plans for all 6 of these key performance indicators. All 6 of these, or I should say the first 2, will hit every classroom, K through 12, in regards to teaching and learning and how our students are progressing. And at the high school, with the AP, there will be many conversations that will involve the program of studies and giving our students voice and choice, which this board has already had conversations about, and looking at other opportunities that are out there for our students, for instance, pre-AP, which is a process that will take multiple years to do it with fidelity. Those are the 6 key performance indicators for academic achievement. Dr. Anderson?
Yeah, just real quick. I was just thinking about, I don't know how you do it in the math, but some of our AP courses are also dual credit courses. Mm-hmm. And so students aren't going to choose to take the exam and pay for the dual credit. So I wonder if there's a way to factor that in, that a student who chooses dual credit doesn't count against a student who would take the exam.
We did not want to put the cart before the horse. We're in building out action plans before we receive board approval.
Sure.
But one of the barriers may be the cost of the exam.
Yeah.
And those are conversations that we need to have in regards to providing opportunities for our students at the high school.
That was my next question. I mean, is that a barrier, the cost of the exam? And sometimes, to the point of cost of the exam, it's also the dual credit, right? And, well, you know, some people might say, well, it's only this much per credit hour, but reality is that much per credit hour, whatever that is, that might not be affordable for some families. So what do we do to fix that? I want to provide everything, so whatever that is to fix that, let's figure it out and fix it.
And we're in agreement with you, and we're gonna, part of our action plans will be to have those conversations and bring recommendations to the board. I will tell you that working with Dr. Hibner at the high school and Dr. Zarmak, they are in tune in regards to where we're at and where they would like to see the high school move towards. And it's been nothing but wonderful conversation we had about what can we do to support our students here in the district.
And I'd like to know what the cost of that is too, because there's a cost factor to
Sure.
it, right? So what is that?
You'll definitely know.
I definitely want to know.
That's why we'll be coming to the board. Goal number 3 is Mr. Manzer.
Speaking of money.
Fiscal responsibility.
Oh, that's too bad, Ryan, that's too bad.
Okay, I did really want to thank my team that we had on fiscal responsibility goal 3. Dr. Ashley Boyers, Mr. Preston Hartman, Ms. Jessica Griggle, and Ms. Melanie Rush. The level of conversation that we had on the financial aspects and the planning in the future, I really appreciated, and our team might not have appreciated as much as myself, but just having this document available is something that I don't think a lot of districts have. I'm going to echo the comments that you heard before. And having this in a written document is honestly something that will go right into our financial planning. And this is something we can provide to our credit rating agencies as well. And just the process alone will pay dividends within those ratings. They assess management, and this is an excellent process. To be able to even have this opportunity and discuss with you these goals is something that I've always wanted to do in a district, and now we have, you guys have set the table to have the forum to really do this. So I'm really excited about it. I'll just go over our goals really quickly. We did carry over some of the previous goals because they were really well thought out goals, and we did add a few new ones. Reduce cyber charter enrollments. We wanted a cost reduction goal, and this is something that I see every single month come through on the bill list, is the costs related to specifically cyber charter schools. There's brick and mortar cyber charter schools, but this goal really tunes into the cyber because we have such a good option in PDLA. And Mr. Preston Hartman is really taking the lead on this, and the work really has been underway and is going to continue. Increase per student revenue. I think you'll see that the data is surprising on where we currently are in the AIU. That was a previous goal that was established that we're carrying forward. Increase alternative sources of revenue. We do an excellent job here. Dr. Hunt specifically carries us in this goal.
It's his goal, and I'm carrying it.
The plan is in place, and we're just executing it. And I'm really excited about the opportunities. This is one of those every penny counts type of categories, is that anything we're able to do here that is not on the local taxpayer is well worth the effort. Increasing our percentage of fund balance. This is one that really, really matters. I really would tie goal, the indicators 3.4 and 3.5. The increasing our district credit rating is, I think that we're a little bit under where we should be, and achieving 2 steps. It's kind of a complicated, we have 2 different credit rating agencies, but all of this is, if I could summarize, is that we're going to try over the next 5 years to increase our credit rating agency rating twice, and in both of those ratings. And increasing your fund balance is one of the most basic ways that you can evidence being fiscally responsible. And the credit rating agencies really key in to that metric. So what we're going to do is our best that we can to plan to increase our fund balance over the next 5 years to evidence our fiscal responsibility. And then goal number or metric number 6 is increasing our capital improvement plan. We've discussed this a lot. I think that we are also not planning enough to put away our own money. This is in a little bit in tune of the debt service reduction. The only way you can start reducing your debt is to save your own money. And we're kind of put down payments on some of these projects or knock out some of these projects with cash instead of debt. And this is hard to do from a planning perspective. It will put some pressures on our budget. We will also be very responsible in setting aside our variances in our budget, and I'll kind of give you a little bit of an overview of that in our final year in budget transfers. Doing those two things of setting aside money sort of at the beginning of the year in our budget and at the end of the year in our variances, we'll be able to really build our capital improvement plan. And I think, in my assessment, if you're able to even accomplish a few of these goals, and if you're able to accomplish most of these goals over the next 5 years, you're going to be on really solid financial footing. And then if you're able to do it for the next 5 years after that, and you put in the effort and be really responsible over a 10-year time frame, you could be a really high-performing, from a financial standpoint, a really high-performing district. And that will lower your cost. It'll lower your debt service cost. It'll lower the cost of the taxpayer because your debt service will be lower. If you're responsible in this area, it will save you money in the future. And I think these goals are really directed specifically at, accomplishing that. And they are tough. I just looked at some of these and already projecting out in the future, and they're tough goals. They're going to be hard to achieve, but if they're worth setting, even if you fall short on some of them.
Can you explain 3.2 for me?
Could you go up just so I can see?
That's the current AIU rankings of the per student revenue should be maintained or improved annually.
Yeah, so this comes from the annual financial report data that every school district has to file with the Department of Education. And so we have really good comparable data. It is surprising to me in our rankings when I look at them is that we are in the, per student, and you can look at this either direction. It could be like, hey, we're really efficient.
Right.
So we don't spend a lot per student. And we don't have a lot of revenue per student. So that could be one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that, we're not spending enough. So you could be on either side of that coin. But I think when you look at per student revenue, being where we are, I think it makes sense to try to push that forward a little bit, is to try to raise that, because then that'll mean, well, even if we are really efficient, which I believe that we are, we'll have just more resources per student, and that will make, I believe that'll make all of these other goals easier to obtain if your per student revenue is kind of where it should be, and I feel like we're a little bit below where we should be.
Yeah. You mentioned reduction of debt services. How come we don't keep that as a metric?
It's because it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time. It's a long-term approach, probably beyond this 5-year window. And the strategy is in capital, I believe. If you have build a capital fund, you'll be less likely to need to borrow as much. You're going to borrow. You're always going to borrow just because you want to match the life of the building that you're redoing. And it makes sense to push that out over 30 years or 20 years or whatever it may be. But if you can just borrow less is what I think you need to do. When you've borrowed $20 million for a project in the past and you're doing another project on that building, say, and when you need to redo it in 25 years, and you borrow $5 million less, like that's the goal, to just borrow less and less. And I think marking that up at that $7 million mark of the debt service, maybe it might be feasible to have that come down, but the opportunities are, even you see the markets the refinance and being able to restructure debt, it's a really complicated, hard thing to do. And it's very hard to put that in a 5-year plan. It's like you kind of have to be ready when your opportunity comes, I guess. And you're not really sure when that's going to be.
And there's a way to explain it too. For instance, when you do debt service, like they come in and say, this is what your annual payments are, and this is how much of it is interest, and some, like just like when you buy your car. But actually, they come in and give you an entire sheet of the 30 years, and it makes your stomach turn when you look at the number. But it does kind of lay out what that looks like, and then when that bond would be eligible to refinance. It's not like you can look at them all and say we're refinancing them all.
And I'll have plenty of time to bore you all on finances in December when I do my budget workshop.
Can't wait. I can't wait.
What 3 talks about is being disciplined. Yeah, we have to be disciplined. It doesn't mean we don't spend, because we've been spending, millions of dollars on curriculum, So like we can spend, we need to be able to spend on kids to make their experiences here the best that they can possibly be. But in order to do that, we have to be disciplined so we can spend more on them later on, so we're not wasting spending. That's what goal 3 is all about.
So I'm going to make an assumption, which my mom always warned me not to do. But I'm guessing a lot of these goals are going to be contingent upon funding from federal and state level as well. So in an election year, I encourage our community to vote for people who support public education and the funding of public education, because we're doing our best, and I give Mr. Manzer a lot of credit. You've done some really good stuff. And so we're trying to make sure that the dollar goes as far as it can, but we need dollars.
Yeah. State-wise, charter reform, federal-wise, continue the federal funding that we're currently receiving. Those are pretty hot topics, I'd say. The charter reform especially is just a common sense thing that everybody knows should be done, that for some reason just can't get done. And that's a state item that needs to get done. And the federal one is tough. That money's probably going to expire. But if we can find the programs that really, really work and they continue to fund them, that would be great.
I have 2 questions, hold on, before you go anywhere. 3.1, cyber enrollments, where are we today compared to where we were March 13th, 2020? Do we know? If you don't know it, we can.
Yeah, I don't know this offhand.
It's hard to tell. With the cyber, we also have PDLA. So how many?
Not including that one, so the ones outside.
No, I guess what I'm saying, Mr. Devine, is that those kids that ended up going to PDLA, how many of them would have went to cyber had we not had PDLA? Right? So I want to make sure we clarify that.
And then my other
We can get you an exact answer on that.
Okay. And then my other question is on 3.3, where do we stand now compared to, like, Dr. Highland, your first day at Plum School District, Mr. Manzer, your first day? Where are we as far as donations, contributions, everything listed there? It has to be an increase, but do you know?
The last 5-year plan is the best place to look for that. It's the same goal that we've been tracking, and that data is available. At least the previous year was that mark that you see there as a starting point. But if you want to address where you came in.
Well, what I would say is I am sure that the previous administration did alternative funding. It wasn't necessarily encapsulated in one place like we're trying to do here. There wasn't an ongoing, so as an example, the side effects, the scoreboard, there were some things with that where there was alternative revenue. There was grants, there was the technology trailer. So those types of things happened, but there was no place that it was encapsulated in one place, Mr. Devine. And so that's what we're trying to do. And again, it goes back to my original point when we were talking about, if you don't measure it, how can you improve on it if you don't know what the measurement is? And so we're putting it out there. But I would say, from the addition to the scoreboards, to the plan that we put out where anybody can buy locker rooms, can buy naming rights to the stadium, we're putting opportunities out there for people to try and attract them to do that. I think the pandemic kind of, I hate to make excuses, but I think that kind of slowed us down a little bit. We can try and get a number for you if you want to. Like if you need us to get a number, we'll try and.
I was just curious. I don't think it's.
I would guess probably between $50,000 and $70,000, probably max, but don't quote me on it.
And I would say this, now that the confusion within the community has sort of dissipated and silenced about trying to go to folks to participate in some of those other programs and other opportunities, I'll be able to revisit. I think that's sort of silenced. Like you can't call through the members anymore and ask for stuff, but I think that sort of has silenced, but that did cause confusion. So I would say that, hopefully we can revisit those after the first of the year, get through the holidays and revisit that information. But yes, the former administration did do a lot of those things, but again, they were truly teacher-driven. A lot of that stuff would be. And I think it'd be, we look every month and we approve these donors choose, and maybe it's 500 or 1,000 or, 300 or whatever the number might be for donors choose. Every single month we're approving stuff that, again, our teachers are bringing in, and that's tens of thousands of dollars over time. And as a matter of fact, Holiday Park, if anybody's interested, we're trying to raise money for a book vending machine. But I think that shouldn't go unnoticed, and I think that's a very viable number because our staff is doing that all on their own.
And these donations and other things that we receive, they're not necessarily things that we're saving money on because they're just coming out of the budget now, because these are things sometimes that we weren't even that we didn't budget for. They're above and beyond.
Right.
Yeah, there are things like the sign on the side of both buildings, like you're in Mustang country. Mm-hmm. People love that, but taxpayer dollars didn't pay for that. That was alternative revenue to pay for that. Some of the scoreboards that in our new baseball and softball field, that's alternative revenue. So a lot of the things that people don't necessarily like to pay for through taxpayer dollars, we're trying to get alternative sources of revenue to pay for that, to be fiscally responsible. So there are a lot of things, like as an example, the back of the scoreboard to the stadium. We just got creative and used the back of it, and that's bringing in somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000, give or take $20,000 a year, where that had not been a revenue source before. Right. And we turned something that was ugly into something nice, and we gave some local businesses an opportunity to promote themselves, and we got our Plum script up there at the same time, and it paid for it, and it's going to continue to pay for it over time.
Right, and Mike, all these things that our teachers do is enhancements to our kids' education, every last bit of it. So, and I think that's important, and I think a lot of the things they do align with the curriculum, right? And they'll say, well, we can get this access, and if we want to bring that into the classroom, and sometimes it is alternative seating, right? And the kids love that. And my open house, Mrs. Rengie is like, my room is not as cool because I don't have all this alternative seating, or, back and forth they were going. But the kids, they genuinely love the different things that are being brought into their classrooms, and it enhances their education. Whether it be for fun or when they may not realize it's learning, which is a good thing at certain levels.
Imagine if we rewind the clock, put this in place before we went, $5 million deficit? Where would be today if we were tracking it?
That's part of the reason we have it.
Well,
Hey, Mike, the other thing in the capsule, there's the PDLA updates that was in, if you look at those slides, I think it's like 5, 6, 7, it covers that pretty good too, to just show the differences. Oh, yours, Mr. Loletta, talk quick before they ask more questions.
hurry up, what you got?
So I lead Goal 4, Satisfy Your Customers and Community. I've led it in the past. This year we have a few new committee members, which Mr. Miller has joined our team, Mr. Walsh, Mr. Mergen, who was on our team before, and Mrs. Macro is on our team this year too. So our goal really feeds off of a lot of the other goals. So this year, if you remember in the past, our goal was always the lengthy one with 11 different key performance indicators. So what we did this year for our proposals, we put a lot of those key performance indicators where we were asking our parents and our students similar questions. We put them together and combined the data so that we could get those key performance indicators down. So you take a look at 4.1 where we ask, we want to satisfy our students and families with our district academic programs. If you look at Goal 2, you're going to see a lot of items in Goal 2. We're going to look at that data and we're going to create an action plan off of that data. We look at specific questions that we ask our students and families on these surveys to gather data and create action plans off those. 4.2.
Dan, can I throw in there?
Sure,
We're going to
absolutely.
report it as an aggregate, but we're still going to be able to get it each individual department. So if there's, we don't want one department to carry another department. So we'll be able to have that individualized data too. Sorry, Dan.
So just like Dr. Highland said, so 4.2, that leads right into 4.2, we're separating it, but it's combined into one data point. Our operational departments, which include technology, transportation, facilities, and food services. We're going to have it broken down into different percentages, but we're also going to group that into one data point to ensure that we are satisfying our students and families. We did not have a facilities question in our student survey before last year. This year we will be adding a facilities question in our student survey so that we can measure that student input as well. 4.3, we take a look at our extracurricular programs provided here in the district. Jen's done a very good job with picking out those different questions that we used in the past. Now we do have a new team, so we need to look at the data that we had in the past and really assess what our students and parents were saying. Get some like items, find different things in that data, and then create an action plan based on that data to be able to move forward and really see how are we going to increase these percentages throughout the next couple years. And then the 4.4, which is one of my favorite ones, we just talked about the scoreboards, the fields, all of the money that we're spending in our academic programs. Will our students and parents, will they recommend our school district to anybody moving in to Western Pennsylvania? How are we doing overall? And a lot of Goal 6, we take a look at that data from Goal 6, and when we take a look at that question that we ask the students and parents. We want to continue to keep that high. We want people to be proud to live here and our students to be proud to go to the district. And 4.5 is new. We asked our seniors last year if we could have their contact information. Was it last 2 years ago? Okay, 2 years ago, Jen and I were going back and forth with that. So two years ago, we asked if we could have their contact information because what we wanted to do is we wanted to develop and deploy a postgraduate survey. We want to identify graduates' overall satisfaction and their preparation for life beyond high school. So our goal this year is to develop that survey. And then we want to deploy it in the 23-24 school year, analyze that data, and then report back a benchmark, and then have a benchmark for the 24-25 school year as to how we move forward and make sure that we're taking the students that graduate from here, getting their input as well, and continuing to capture that as we move forward. So 4.5 is a newer key performance indicator.
I just want to comment on the postgraduate survey. This is something I have experience with. We do this in my program. It's actually a requirement for our grant funding. And we do it, once our trainees leave, we do it 2, 5, and 10 years out, because what we have found is when people initially leave, they're overwhelmed with what's happening, particularly when they're moving out of high school into college and work and all of those fun grown-up things that we've all gotten to do. So it gives them some time to settle in, and then we follow them and their development over time to see if there are changes in the roles that they have taken on and if they see an influence as they develop and mature. And just maybe something you might want to consider rather than just surveying kids the first year out. I'm not sure.
We weren't going to survey them the first year out. Minimally, we were talking at least 2 to 3. So if they were into a career, they would have been 2 years into a career. that had their sophomore year under their belt, if they went to college. I'm curious to see, is the return rate, does it drop off significantly at 5 and 10, I assume, correct?
So it depends on the different programs we actually have a standard that's set, and we're supposed to reach 80%. I have found personally, being with this program for going on 10 years, I now know the graduates who have been out during that time, so I'm a familiar face per se. So the response rates tend to be better when they're people that I have established a personal rapport with, rather than those who predated me, who were like, who is this person and why is she bugging me? There's a lot of factors that can influence it. We are doing a research project that we survey our trainees every year, even though our requirement is 2, 5, and 10, and that increases response rates, believe it or not, because you're bugging them on the regular. So a lot of it is just maintaining some sort of relationship with the people that you want to get that feedback from. And how you do that is challenging, and some of the other programs have gotten very creative, but I'm happy to share some of that information for sure.
Appreciate it. And are we currently using National Student Clearinghouse data already? Do you know? Do we know?
I believe they started this year with the, with Naviance.
Did we do it?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to say, that we can do that, and I think Naviance will do it 3 times a year for us, so I think that, and that is no effort from the students whatsoever, so.
Yeah, also, I don't know if it's possible to break it down this way, but it would be interesting to see results from a variety of different paths that students take once they graduate, be it trades or a collegiate, line, and then into a professional, career field or military, what have you. So, might be interesting to see that.
It'd be cool to have like a Plum LinkedIn where undergrads can help other grads get jobs, but
there you go.
Use the data.
And I'm even willing to share the survey that we use. Obviously, it's not going to be completely applicable, but you can see the types of things that they're looking to measure as far as, what you gained from your experience. And they look at things like what leadership roles you hold. Are you involved in certain elements that we train them for? So I'm happy to share that with you guys as a team.
Yeah, any information is good information, and it's going to be a difficult survey to build, and I'm sure we'll vet it a couple times, bring it to the cabinet, and then we'll bring it to you afterwards, so.
I just have something really quick. So if I'm understanding correctly, for 4.1 through 4.4, you're going to combine the data from parents and students to get your percentage total. I would ask that you give consideration when you report out on the data to us in the community, that you also include the percentages for students and the percentages for parents separately. I know you guys will drill down to it, but I as a citizen and as a data junkie would really like to see if we have a discrepancy in one or more of the areas and what those might be, and what your team's thoughts are on why we might have such a discrepancy. To me, that would be very telling. So if you could give that consideration.
Sure. Yep. Thank you all.
My goal is cultivate a first-rate workforce, and I have the pleasure of working with Ms. Kelly Gibson, Mr. Scott Lazaro, Mrs. Lisa Kranick, and Ms. Amy Baumgart-Ivan. We really kept most of the same goals, but really wanted to make sure that we're looking at professional development for all of our staff, not just for our teachers and our professional employees, but our support staff as well, because they are an integral part of our daily operations. Just like Rachel's Challenge is a part of every part of our district, our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers, our custodians. We want to make sure that we are growing every employee in our district. And we had kind of not been doing that very well with our support staff. So there's a concerted focus with our key performance indicators to make sure that we're listening to them, that we're providing them the professional the growth opportunities that they need so that they can hopefully matriculate up and take new positions in the district. The other thing that we really wanted to look at is our turnover rate. We really want to hold on to the people because we're making a tremendous investment in our staff, folks that are here for 30 years or 35 years. And so we want to maintain those folks. And so we want to look at those people that may choose to leave us, and we will gather that data through an exit interview. Are they leaving us to go into another field, or are they leaving us to go to another school district? What is the reason that they're leaving us, and what can we do better, and what can we learn from that? So that's, and attendance is always something that we want to look at, is how are our staff performing in attendance? What types of incentives, what type of motivators? If they're happy in their work, then they're going to come to work. And we have a tremendous staff here with all of our different areas. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Any questions on cultivating a first-rate workforce? Then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Scholler to bring us home.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I had the opportunity with goal number 6, measure against the best, an external look at the Plum Borough School District comparative in nature to other school districts and other reports that are available for us to see, okay, we're looking internally, but how are we doing externally? And I had an opportunity to work with Dr. Dana Iera and Mrs. Renee Aubrin for this goal. And we certainly had a constructive conversation as an MST team behind the scenes regarding this, exactly what is the best. And as you can see here with the key performance indicators, we did keep several of the key performance indicators as the previous balanced scorecard, looking at the Pittsburgh Business Times in relation to the metrics that are put out there for the overall ranking relative to the best school districts in Western Pennsylvania. We also kept the niche rating, which takes a look at 10 different factors that stakeholders within the school districts can weigh in with. This would include academics, facilities, sports, college preparations, teachers, and then a few. One of the newer key performance indicators that we're looking at for measuring against the best is using the Future Ready index and taking a look at the college and career readiness, but the 4-year cohort graduation rate here in Plum Borough relative to the top performing school districts. So we're able to pull a baseline with that for right now and have set what we believe to be some productive goals for this moving forward. And the last key performance indicator that we have, which was similar to the previous balanced scorecard, was looking at the U.S. News report for college readiness in relation to their overall index rankings that come out each school year and how Plum Borough is doing with this particular metric. Any questions?
I just want to say I'm excited about 6.3 and looking at our graduation or matriculation rates, because I think it also gives us an opportunity to look at why are we losing kids and what can we do to fix that. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
As I shared with you before, our balanced scorecard is so much more robust than the comprehensive plan. The action plan that we have really addresses those 4 goals, and you'll note on the action plan that cultivate a first-rate workforce is our goal 5. And so just didn't want you to be confused because we're allowed 4 goals with the comprehensive plan. It really is a very complex process to go through the Future Ready comprehensive planning. Our department leaders, our 17 department leaders, really took a lead in the early part of the comprehensive planning by making sure that they talked to all of our staff regarding the needs assessment that we've shared in our capsules before, the data with teaching and learning, analyzing Future Ready comprehensive plan, which is goal 2, and really digging in. And so you'll see a lot more items in the draft comprehensive plan that we didn't discuss today. But the important part is really our balanced scorecard, because that is above and beyond what the state asks us to do. And we change our action plans every single year because we are looking at the data, not just at the end of a 3-year cycle and revisiting it. We're looking at it annually. and we're reporting out to the board and to our community on that every January. And so again, I want to thank all of the department leaders, the administrators who have done a nice job with really gathering all of this information. There are the other 5 reports that are required as part of the comprehensive plan that have been linked in the capsule and that will be available for you to review if you have any questions. But again, if we could skip 3 slides ahead. We have to have a 28-day public review. So on October 25th, if you approve this, we will put it out for a 28-day public review. We'll gather any comments. We had no public comments on our special ed plan, but again, we want to bring those back, and then we will ask for your approval at our November meeting so that we can submit it to the state before our November 30th deadline. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you for all the work.
Thank you.
Right, exactly. Dr. Walsh, are you doing the fine arts curriculum review update?
I'm just going to talk for a few minutes. Dr. Anderson, this is not a voting item. This is just to keep the board updated on upcoming events. Fine arts is in the curriculum cycle this year, so we're reviewing the resources. We have 9 members on our core team. Myself and Ms. Sedlak are the district central office representatives. Mr. Hartman is the vertical team administrator, and Mr. Duluth is the department leader. And we have representatives from Pivic, O-Block, HP, and Plum Middle School that are a part of that core team. Just quickly, so that the board is aware, we've already started this process in May and June, and we defined the approach. The group has been looking at resources that are available for fine arts, K through 12. Right now, they're looking at recommendations for courses. There'll be recommendations, if any, during the program of studies in January. And at that time in January, the core team will look at the resources and narrow it down to about 3 resources. And they'll take a deep dive into those resources during our in-service agenda in January. In February, there will be site visits. And in April, as has been accustomed the last few years, we'll be bringing recommendations to the board for fine arts. The goal is, and with our timeline, which I believe it has worked well, is once the board approves, the next day we are ordering the materials and we're getting the resources. Our teachers have the resources before they leave that calendar year. And the reason for that is we want them to have the resources because we begin professional development at the end of the school year. So we're not winding down, we're building up towards the following year. This was just a brief reminder that over the next few months, there'll be a lot of the academics coming to the board's way with handbooks, programs of studies, curricular recommendations, and it was just a brief update. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we go back and do we have 5 to move forward the Future Ready Comprehensive Plan? They could go over it again if we need them to. Yeah, okay. Any questions on the 3 grants and awards? Grants awarded and donations. Tanya Coy, Jessica Griggle, and Chris Seigel. Do we have 5 to move those forward? Thank you. And thank you to them always. I guess the one for Mrs. Griggle is the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank to thank. Letter C for Mrs. Loy and Mr. Duluth and Mr. Bronchi to go to take a trip for our Plum High School Music Department to the Festival of Music in Williamsburg, Virginia, April 27th through the 30th. Any questions on that? Do we know how their fundraising has gone? Does anybody have any? I just wonder. I saw it was $740 a kid. I just didn't know it said minus the fundraising efforts. I just wonder. I looked with parent eyes. You looked with the superintendent eyes.
I will find out.
That's okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Do we have 5 to move that forward? Okay, thank you.
Is that, we're muted for, but is that the marching band trip? I have people asking me, have we approved the marching band trip? And marching band trip is not. Okay.
Can this would be the mom and me too. When they take that trip, can you just let the board know once they made it?
Okay.
Just we're all on a bus, 200 kids, right? Anyway, okay. I think it would be fun to know they made it okay.
Not one bus.
I know, right? There's a lot of buses making that trip. Okay.
Hey, listen, I wanted to take the old Mustang on that one trip where we had to put the school buses to go to DC, and I was like, just put the head of the old Mustang on one and the tail on the other. Just
Send them on their way.
What a disaster that was.
Okay, and letter D, the athletic trainer request for proposal. As if you guys may or may not be aware, the contract is up at the end of this year, and so we need to put it out for a request for proposal. I don't know if any of you have been in attendance at many of these events that happened, that go on for our athletic programs, and how important and vital the trainers are for it. And so I think it's November when the deadline is, Dr. Howell, in the middle of November.
Well, there's actually no deadline. Once the board approves it, which would be, sorry.
That's okay. The RFP deadline, there's not a deadline for their submissions?
Once you approve it, then we're going to put it out for 2 weeks.
Okay.
And we're looking for November, probably for approval in December, once we have an opportunity to vet the RFPs.
For those who are submitting RFPs,
Correct.
November, the November 16th deadline. Yep, okay.
And Dr. Anderson, is
Yep.
there anything we're looking for different than what we've looked for in the past?
Can I give my own personal opinion?
From
From my personal opinion, I think coverage is incredibly important for kids. I can say there's been numerous times where I've been at events and we've had no trainer, and we have coaches put in positions that are fairly awkward where they're not supposed to have to handle some things that they've had to handle. And we have different campuses, right, and teams in different locations. And so to me, absolutely the acumen of the services that they're receiving. But I also think it's really important for us to support our coaches and our athletes with somebody to be present. I've even been present on this campus where a trainer has been at one field and a hurt individual had to be ushered from one field to that field to find the trainer. And I just think the better we can do, we might not be able to make it perfect, but what's that? Okay. The better we can do, and maybe we can't, and we got to be fiscally responsible, we got to figure it out. But from my perspective, I think coverage is really important.
Who do we use today?
I always say the wrong
ESMCC or?
Yes, Suburban Sports, I always say the acronym.
And I think,
Go ahead.
my hot dog duty privies me to a lot of information. And I've heard some of the same sentiments that, how do we expand that, how do we make it better? So,
Yeah. I mean, I've seen torn ACLs with a bunch of adults trying to figure out what to do for a kid and how to stabilize a kid who's in horrible pain without a trainer present, just somebody, to give peace of mind even to the parent while you're waiting for an ambulance and what to do.
Sure.
And I think one thing, if it's our home student who that happens, athlete who that happens to, but even worse if it's somebody from another district and we're not able to support them accordingly in our buildings or on our
So
fields.
that's my question from my own knowledge. Is this somebody that is strictly on site for events, or do they travel for road?
Yeah, go ahead.
games, or-
So generally you have one,
This is Brian Letter, I'm here, I'm on virtual.
Oh, wonderful,
For
thank you.
football games, they do travel, and for football games, for the whole season, they travel as well.
Gotcha. Thank you.
if the board will notice, in the actual request for proposal, there's an alternate A and an alternate B. We're trying to get as much coverage as we possibly can. And I would say this board has not been shy about increasing the number of sports and activities for kids. So as you continue to do that, we're going to need coverage for those things.
Sure.
And I would say the other thing too, from a superintendent's point of view, it also mitigates potential liability too when we have more coverage. So all things to think about.
Hey, they helped my girl when she was the ball girl for the soccer team. She got hit in the face with a ball.
Yeah.
Stepped over the
But
ice
even when
pack.
you think about that, you have junior high athletes who aren't receiving any support for junior, not always, but by and large aren't necessarily receiving support at a lot of their sporting events or, in the same services that we might give to high school athletes, and yet they might need those, right?
All
And
athletes.
yeah, that's exactly
No,
right.
absolutely, and that's why I look at this and I see, when we'll travel with for each football game, but you can get just as hurt in soccer, you can get, I mean,
Right.
so to me, it's not just football, it's basketball, it's everything.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything to say. I think it would behoove us to also, I mean, East Suburban has done a great job.
Right.
But East Suburban, we need more coverage, right? So we as a board, I think, just need to look to be able to find the most coverage that we possibly can.
It's a good way of telling them what we want.
Yeah.
Sure, and, you know, they respond to what we put out there, so now we're saying this is what we want more of. And
Yep, absolutely. Okay, do we have 5 to move that forward?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. The substitute nursing services agreement for 22-23.
I'm going to kick that to Denise.
That is an agreement so that we. The Bayada Nursing Agreement is to provide LPNs or RNs to support our students with special needs due to the fact that we are unable to hire them. We are trying vehemently to hire nurses, but it is a stopgap until we can hire someone.
Thank you. Do we have 5 to move that forward? Awesome. I do not have anything else except for our golf team qualified for finals, for Whitfield finals, and West Lorish, one of our golfers, qualified for individual finals.
Nice.
All right, safe and supportive schools, Mr. Adams, is there anything for discussion today?
Nothing for this evening.
All right, budget and finance, Ms. Chatterwoods.
Okay, so budgetary items 1 through 3 as listed below. Number 1, the treasurer's report. Number 2, food service bills. And number 3, budget transfers. Do I have 5 to move?
Yes, ma'am.
Letter B are the final year-end budget transfers for 2021, 2022. Any questions?
Just a comment on there, the notable one is a $600,000 transfer into capital fund. And that basically what that does is it takes all of the excess dollars that were remaining in the expenditure accounts that were not tied to grants, and it rolls into capital.
Okay, that was the question I had. Thank you. I was actually trying to read all this stuff, but then it all started to lump together.
5 to move those forward.
Yes, ma'am.
And letter C is something that does not need voted on, but is something for discussion, is the budgetary timeline for 2023-24 is posted on our district website under the finance tab. And what it does is just some things to note are with the final budget. That is going to be presented in late April and does not need to be voted on again to be presented until the last week of May is the deadline to adopt the final budget. Where in years prior it had been first week of June. Any questions?
I just have a question for my own personal knowledge. I noticed the index is way high this year. Is there any conversation about why that's happening? Is that a pushback of the state to the localities or?
That is a mathematical calculation that is dictated by a statute. And what is occurring there is, it's a COVID-related impact, is that the equation involves the number of available jobs, and that metric has moved, substantially, and it's causing the calculation to kind of go awry, if you will. But it is also meant to try to calculate, wages. The wage base is a part of that as well, and you've seen wages going up and you've seen inflation. Like, this doesn't really align with inflation the way it's calculated, but it is sort of intentional as far as if the wages are going up and it's the jobs are few, this is going to continue to increase. And this is a multi-year average calculation, so it is likely that this will stay high for a few years. It'll kind of, when it starts to come down, it'll come down slowly. And you saw that last year at 4.5, it was raising up, and then this year is 5.4, and it's going to stay there. So you're going to have some flexibility in your capacity to raise taxes moving forward, which is a really positive thing. Just to follow up on the calendar too, is that you're going to have your opt-out option like you normally do. We can go through the preliminary budget process if you so choose, and go through the referendum exceptions. If you want to opt out of that process, you can. That decision's sort of aligned there for you on the timeline. And then also, just to echo what Megan was saying, is that we used to really approve our budgets in May and June. That June, very, very late June timeframe was a little too late for us, is that it actually delayed the issuance of the tax bills. And in surveying some other districts, I found another one that does this process where they do the April-May timeframe. And we do have a pretty late May approval, and I think that's going to work really, really well for us. And we structure our board calendar to anticipate this. And now that our timeline's here, I think it's going to really, really help us internally at the business office too, is to free up June to be able to close out year end and not have to be working on budget during June. So if you're supportive of that, I'd highly recommend to make that switch to do the April-May calendar.
I'm okay with it. My question is sort of part of the legislative duties is, in past years, I sort of beat up our legislators and say, where are we? Mostly over fair funding formula because it's not really so fair for Plum Borough. But other things, like is our number going to stay about the same? Because that would be something we would look at for budgeting purposes. I know it's pretty much stayed, give or take a little bit of a difference each year. So I guess I'll just stay more up to date with that faster than I would more normally than towards the end of their budget sessions. That's because everything gets negotiable in that last 30 days there.
In my 11, 12-year career, I haven't seen too many times where at the time that we've passed our budget, that we've known what that number is going to be anyways.
Correct.
And so we tend to always just plan 1 year behind. Whatever they approve, we'll roll into our following year budget. And also, our budget process starts so early in December, January, and then we're also, in the old schedule, would have to do a proposed final in May. We don't know those numbers anyway, so
right.
I don't think that there's a whole lot lost. If we do have a major change, there's an option to reopen your budget, which I don't think we would do anyways, but
right.
Administratively, we can anticipate any of those changes throughout the year and then in our next year budget cycle.
Right. My only concern is the fair funding formula. It's really my only concern.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we'll see some charter school reform, but who even knows?
There's no other comments for letter D. I think Mr. Manzer did an excellent point of why his attendance at the PA School of Business official conference from March 15th to the 17th in the Pocono Manor Resort is so vital to him. He gains a lot of new and fresh ideas and different techniques that he can then report back to us and we can incorporate. So he has submitted his proposal to attend the conference. I'm listed in the link, and do we have 5 to move? Thank you.
Maybe we can put an advertisement on the side of his car.
All right. Facilities and operations, Mr. Hill?
Letter A, the ever-driven transportation contract is a draft contract. I'm guessing this is because we need bus drivers?
Yeah, this is really a specialty contract. This is only going to be utilized if we're not able to service the transportation ourselves. And I anticipate that we'll only use this for 1 or 2 runs that are really hard to service. They're outside of district runs. They're special education, really tough to fill. And this company specializes in providing just that service.
Yeah, they're not driving our kids to our schools there outside of the district.
Correct. And the only reason for the draft is that our changes are with their legal department right now, and we're waiting for our changes to be approved. And as soon as it is, we'll make sure we update this for board approval, but I don't anticipate any significant material changes to happen.
And this will be on the next voting. Okay. Any questions or further discussion? We have 5 to move forward. And then we're going to purchase a bunch of paper towels.
Sounds great, Adam.
Any questions on that?
I don't think we can question that, can we?
What's that?
I don't think we can question that, can we?
Are we getting the best price?
Unless you want to bring your own. 5 to move forward. That's all I have, and I have nothing in Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
On to the next.
Intergovernmental, Mr. Devine, nothing for this month?
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Legislative, Mr. Stepnick.
Yes, we have in here, they must be doing everything in Poconos, so maybe now they'll bring everything to Pittsburgh in the next year, but I'm just putting that out there. I bring that up every time I go to this. This is the annual PSBA School Leadership Conference. Typically, it's all of the legislative liaisons and/or our regional folks from PSBA that gather, and there's some really, I think, great breakout sessions that I think Plum will benefit from, some being mental health, and I even saw on the comprehensive plan about MTSS for, sort of the secondary age kids, and so I think I'll be able to bring a lot of information back, and I'm looking forward to sitting through some of those breakout sessions. And I think afterwards, it's the day after, right, Jen? It's the day after the conference ends, it's actually strictly just a mental health, I think it's 4 or 5 hour session on different resources.
We have 5, move that forward. Great. Policy, that's me. Ms. Sedlak, is there anything you want to highlight in particular with these? This is wonderful reading material for all of us.
I would like to thank Mrs. Macro for making it user-friendly for the board members to read and review. Most of these changes are impacted by changes to the school code and legal changes, Act 55 as it relates to school safety. And those changes, again, are highlighted. Mrs. Macro did a great job.
Thank you, Mrs. Macro.
Could I just address the disposable equipment one? I alluded to this previously in the last board meeting, but the change on there is just simply, we want to be able to get rid of our junk easier. So it just is a tweak in the policy to where we're able to determine if something is of no value. And then if something is of resale value, we'll take that to the board and you guys can set the minimum resale value and then we'll go through a bidding process. That was a locally suggested change, I think, to make it easier on us to be able to more quickly get rid of things that are of no value at all.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I have a question on 237. This is more for Mr. Dice. In the policy, so the green text is recommended by PSBA. The guideline states that the violation of this policy shall result in disciplinary action and may result in confiscation of the electronic device. I've heard there sometimes are legal issues with that because a cell phone might be like a diabetic device or things along those lines. And this is pretty broad. It says it may result. Do you have any issues with that wording?
Just in looking at the policy, I believe it even says we're going to take into account any student's IEP or 504 agreement. So I think that would just be a part of the process of removing the device. Obviously, if there's some sort of diabetic monitoring, I think the district will take that into account.
And do we know all those people that use those our devices for those?
We should, absolutely.
For what?
Cell phones for diabetic monitoring.
I can tell you, as a general rule of thumb, we don't take students' property, and probably the only reason we would is if in fact there may be some sort of police investigation that may have to go on. We try and stay away from kids' properties.
Hopefully take my kid's cell phone. Maybe he could just not play Madden for like 2 days.
Just let me know, Michelle. We'll get it done for you.
I'm just wondering.
Violate the policy.
There might be some fun generation we can do in there.
No, and I think it's important for kids to know that as well as this thing is involving the school, but if you do that stuff outside of school and it falls into the classroom and it keeps on making a disruption in the classroom, there could be issues there too, and I think it's important for kids to know that. They think, well, I did it outside of school, so whatever. But the reality is, if you've made it uncomfortable for kids to be in a classroom, and I think it teaches a sense of accountability to them.
Anything else?
Yeah, two things. One, on 252, I just thank you guys for adding in the inclusion of the police department, because I think we did this one recently with the PSBA changes, and I noticed that was missing and appreciate that that was added. And then on 220 for student expression, as I read through it, I only get super comfortable with it when it gets to the bottom where it says that anything that's going to be disseminated will be reviewed by being submitted to the building principal 1 day in advance of its distribution. Can we just make sure, if we're going to do that, that it shows that the principal, if they don't review it within 1 day, the student can presume that it is okay for them to distribute? I don't know that I'm comfortable with it being that silence or a missed piece of paper from, a student to a principal, and a principal has a busy day, means that they can distribute it 24 hours later. That would just be my...
Dean, I'm going to defer to you on any of that First Amendment stuff.
No, I think we could certainly, if we want to have a reasonable time period for a principal to review, we can extend that. I wouldn't extend it too far because you get into what's called prior restraint with the First Amendment. But if we wanted to give them 2 days, 3 days.
Or can we do it the opposite? Like where it says, if notice of disapproval is not given, students may consider the request approved and proceed. I just want them to get approval. Do you know what I mean? Not for it to be the fact that a principal said nothing means that it's approved. Does that make sense?
No,
Can we do that a different way?
Yeah, I think we could put into the policy that the failure to act by a principal is not an immediate approval if it's not done within 24 hours. I would say we want to have some mention there of a timeline, and we would inform the principals, hey, when you get this sort of stuff, you do have to act on it in a timely manner. I think the reason that 24 hours is in there is what's called prior restraint, which is outside of a school district. You wouldn't even be allowed to have them submitted. Just because it's a school, we can do that. But I think we can do what you're saying.
Yeah, or an official process so that something doesn't fall through the cracks. That if a principal wouldn't, I don't know, whatever way they need to submit or what have you.
Is that something we can use our ticketing system for? They can put it in a request for approval?
Honestly, I think that it would depend on each building. I would hate to have that in the policy. I may want to have that in the administrative regs because every school is going to be a little bit different. Certainly how you would treat high school kids is certainly different than how you treat middle school kids and all the way down. So I wouldn't want to make it too cumbersome, quite frankly.
No, right.
But if Dane's good with it, the rest of the board is.
Can we make sure that it says school days? I don't want somebody to send something on a Friday and expect an answer on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's probably I agree with that.
Okay, so what we can do is we can go back and get some new language in here to bring it back to you folks. It doesn't necessarily have to be approved at this month's meeting. We'll bring it back to you, have you take a look at it, and then put it on November's agenda. Does that work for everybody? Yes? Okay.
Thank you.
Whatever works for you.
I just have one quick question. Regarding draft policy 707, have we given any thought to how we classify St. John's or the YMCA and how we view them in their tiered status, if they are going to be, a feeder program, and is anybody, or is this open to all the other clubs if they want to submit for consideration?
Have they applied for it?
So you're asking if what it fits into?
Yeah, if
the
we,
why,
because
for example?
I know when this was brought up before, I myself had some considerations and I personally voted no because of how the YMCA and St. John's was classified in the tier successful. I was just wondering if there had been any consideration on, opening them up or asking them to reapply for?
I have not received that request from them. I don't know if anybody else, have you received that request?
No.
If obviously, if they submit some sort of request, we would certainly bring that forward to the board.
I know what in years past, what's always been the problem is, especially things that the YMCA would do aren't 90% Plum students. I don't know if that was the same for Holy Family, but that's always kind of been the threshold for community organizations, is that they have to meet that. So, and they're listed in there with that, but they have to be able to have 90% Plum.
Okay, so if they could get moved to like a feeder group instead of the tier 1, correct?
No, even being that community organization, they need to have 90% Plum students and who's utilizing the facilities. When you think about it from a taxpayer perspective, if I'll fall on the sword of the basketball program, right? If the Y is hosting a basketball program and they're using our building for it, and let's say, I'm just gonna totally make numbers up, 33% of the kids are from Franklin, 33% are from Kiski, and 33% are from Plum, one could argue our taxpayer dollars are being used to provide services for Franklin and for
To better their basketball
Kiski,
program.
to support their basketball program. So that's why that 90% threshold is trying to benefit Plum, right? I think that's the best way to kind of explain that for those who are using the facility.
Beautifully spoken.
What's that?
Beautifully spoken.
Thanks, well,
That's definitely helpful. And then, I guess for tier 2, with the Plum Mustang Foundation, has it been designated if we are affiliated or not affiliated, or would it fall under, private interest groups or individual? Or is that something that we would all have to decide?
They're now properly aligned with other civic clubs, veterans clubs, Lions, Rotary. They're on the same platform.
which again,
They're
would need to be
nonprofits,
90% Plum. Right, like the way I read that, district support groups removed Plum Borough Education Foundation from it. And then the next grouping is community organizations. Tier 1, it lists those. Tier 2, it's listing the groups that are considered in that, but those groups need to meet the threshold for being a community organization, or else they would be considered a private interest group or individual.
That's right, and they're not district affiliated, so they
Right.
can't meet the district support group label.
It's like the distinguished alumni, they meet and they use the school, right? But it's almost all Plum. That's at that table. And some of those alumni give healthy, sizable donations back to the district or to various, groups to support whatever their goal would be for that, whatever their donation goal would be.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
So we're moving all but 220.
So we're moving, I'm gonna ask for 5 to move A1, and then 3 through 11. We have 5 to move those forward, and 220 is gonna sit back for a month.
Yes, sir.
All right.
And probably out of pure principle, I won't vote for 707, and it has nothing to do with the Mustang Foundation.
Okay.
But that's always gonna be my thing, so take it or leave it.
Equity inclusion, Ms. Wetmore, nothing this time?
I just wanted to mention, I don't know if everybody saw the news last night, I think they reported on, UPMC has developed a tool for mental health called RX Well, which has shown huge success in teens and young adults in a recent research study. And the focus is on, it provides coping techniques to users in real time. So it gives them relaxation, meditation, and tools for tolerating stress. And then if they're in a state that requires more, they have an option to speak with a coach, a mental health coach. So I just wanted to share that resource with everybody who's listening. Because it's been on the Today Show and Good Morning America, and UPMC developed it right here at home. So it is RxWell, and it's downloadable.
Community engagement, outreach, and development. Ms. Stepnick, anything for discussion?
Not for tonight, no.
Thank you. Citizens' comments on non-agenda items. We have no one here. Upcoming public meetings, board action meeting Tuesday, the 25th of October at 7 p.m. here in the library. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor? Motion carries. Good night.
Gotcha.